Now that I've created my pivot table, I want to analyze this data in a way that looks a little bit more visually appealing. So I want to create some charts. I want to create two separate charts. One to show total assets for the entire industry over the period 2008 to 2018, and then a second chart to show the total or aggregate net income over that same period. Now, while there's multiple ways to do this, I'm going to choose to do it in this manner. I'm going to select the years and the sum of the total assets or aggregate or total assets. Once it's selected, I'm going to copy, Control C. I'm going to come down below, skip a few lines, and I'm going to go to Paste, Special Values. I believe if I just paste with Control V, yep, that works just as well. Okay, so copy, paste with Control V. I'm going to add the headings year and total assets. I'm going to create a chart that's going to show me how did, in a visual manner, how did total assets change over my time period. With my cursor selected on the first value, here in, for me it's E15, the first year 2010, I'm going to go to Insert, up in the ribbon up at top, and I can do recommended charts, or I could come up here. I'm going to want to have a bar chart. I'm going to start with recommended charts. And this is one of my favorites here. This is called the clustered column. It's nice when you have two sets of data that you're trying to show, for example, incomes versus men versus incomes for women. I don't want to put side by side assets versus total assets. Why not? Well, assets are huge, and net income is going to be much smaller. So if I were to do a pivot table, now let me come out of here. If I were to do a chart from my pivot table, here's what it would look like. My assets make the net income look almost meaningless and unimportant. So I want to do two separate charts to show the variation between size and performance or income, total income. Okay, so once again, for my chart, select the first data point, which is the year 2010, recommended charts. I like this one, clustered column. Let's do that. And hit OK. I'm going to move this up over to the side. And now I have a nice visual way of reporting how are total assets, what's happening to this industry. Well, it got a little bit smaller between 2010 and 2014, but then it grew almost consistently between 2014 to 2018. So it's fair to say that this industry, this two-digit SIC code industry, is growing over our period here. Let's do the same for our net income. I'm going to copy the years. Actually, it might make more sense to copy them from here because I already have my header. Select the fields, Control C, come down, Control V, and now I want to select the net income values. I don't want the total, that's not going to help me any. I'm going to come down to this cell. I'm still going to need to input my header for total net income or total income. Now that I've got my value area, I'm going to hit Control V. And I'm going to do the same thing. Select the year, first year, 2010, the first place that there's the data. Insert, recommended charts. I'm going to choose this first one that comes up, clustered column. I'm going to place it next to my total assets and scroll down just a bit, maybe even make my worksheet just a little bit smaller so I can look at what happens. Net income, this graph for my industry is fantastic because it really shows an industry that's improving almost consistently, continually over the time period here. While the company grew smaller, look at this, the data from 2010 to 2014, the company was getting small, the industry was getting smaller, and look at what was happening to income. Now, does it make sense that while an industry is getting smaller and income is growing, that the company would then invest further? Sorry, not the company, the industry would then grow? Absolutely. That's our market system, right? You see an industry doing well, more competitors enter the market. But despite that, so we see or even if not more competitors, the companies themselves are growing. And what's happening to income, aggregate income, increasing. So it looks like my industry that I've chosen is doing well. Now we're going to go to the next step, which let's ask the question, how has the industry done over the most recent 5-year period by looking at ratio values? So now that we're done with the totals, I'm periodically going to save my workbook. Let's go back to this industry data. Remember, we've created these ratios, these 6 ratios. These first 4 are examining performance. Current ratio is examining liquidity. And the liabilities to asset ratio is going to give us the data we need to examine solvency. Now let's look at how have those ratios changed over time. Now I can't get aggregate values of a ratio. It wouldn't make sense to add net profit margin for all the different companies. I want to get a better measure, a summary measure of by year, for example, how was net profit margin? One option would be to take the average. And we can use a pivot table to get the average of net profit margin and, in fact, all of these ratios. But the problem with using the average, and there's not always a problem, every time I go over the results of an exam, I discuss the average because that's important. But when 5 people have a grade of a 100 and 3 people have a grade that's lower than 20, the average might not be very indicative. Or, for example, if most people get a grade that's in the 80s, but a few people have grades in the 20s, the average is going to look unnecessarily low because of those outlier the data points, those values in the 20s. Same thing for net profit margin. We have some companies that are going to have very, very high or very, very low, and that could skew our average. That makes it less representative of the whole population. Instead, I'm going to use median values, those middle values. Using medians works well when we have a very variable data set for our variables that we're looking at. And in this case, we're going to have a lot of variation. So perhaps median values will give us the best analysis. So the next step, I'm going to create another worksheet. Down at the bottom of the screen here, I'm going to click this plus sign. I want to create a worksheet where I have just the ratio data for years. I'm going to call this worksheet Ratios. Only the ratios and the years. The names don't matter anymore. So I'm going to go back to the industry data worksheet. I want to select year. So I hover over column B, Control, select, and I can either paste that and then come back, but let me hold down Control and take the rest of the fields that I want. I'm hovering over column P and then left clicking to select it and choosing the rest. So somehow this cell P2 had been highlighting it. So I'm highlighted, that's not working. I'm going to try it one more time. B, hold down Control, select P all the way through U. Control C to copy this data. Come to this new Ratios Only tab. And I'm going to come up here and do paste, because if I paste that, I might run into trouble with those formula references. I want to paste the values. Let's see, if I just pasted with the formulas, turns out that would work too. All right, when I paste values instead of formulas, when I click on the cell, there's no reference to other data. Here, there was references to how that variable was calculated, but when I paste the values, I simply get the numeric answer. That's what I'm interested in here. Now, this data looks messy with all of these digits, so I'm going to highlight all of these columns, come up top, do the drop down, and choose number, and that's going to give me my ratios to 2 decimals, which is typically how these are displayed. Now I have just the ratios and years. So I want to know what was the median net profit margin in year 2010. what was in median net profit margin in 2011, and so forth, all through until, actually, I'm not going to start at 2010, from years 2014 to 2018. I don't want you guys to go completely insane, so let's just look at the most recent 5-year period, 2014 through 2018. What were median values of net profit margin, earnings per share, ROA, ROE, current ratio, and liabilities to assets? To do that, now there might be another way to do this, but this is going to be a little tedious, but the tediousness here is intentional because I want you doing some of these tasks again and again to get comfortable with them. So I'm going to create year-specific worksheets. Come down below, click the plus sign, rename, right-click, rename. Let's start with either 2014 or 2018, and we'll go in order. Let's start with 2014. Now I want on this worksheet only data relative to 2000, and that's for year 2014. How do I get that? I'm going to apply a filter. Hover over this row 1, over the 1, left click, come up at the top ribbon, data, and then choose filter. I'm going to take off the filter for all, and I want 2014. Okay. Here's all the data that I want. Now I have a divide by 0, so if I was trying to calculate an average, let's say I needed to calculate an average, and I don't, so you don't need to do this, I'm going to get an error. So typically if I see that, if I wanted an average, I would need to delete this, but with the median value, it shouldn't matter. Let's just test that. No, we are going to need to get rid of that. Okay, so when I come up to this earnings per share, I am going to delete anything that has a divide by 0. Now that I have this, just like we've done earlier, select this data that relates to the 1 year that we want, come to this tab, 2014, and paste it in cell A1, Control V. Now I want to calculate the median values. So I have for the year 2014, each of my ratios. Let's start with net profit margin. I'm going to skip a row just for my own visual benefit, and I'm going to do median values. I want to tell Excel this is a function, equals, find the median, open parentheses, between all my values that are up top. So I can either type in B2 through B26, or I can choose cell B2 and scroll down into B26, close my parentheses. And now that I have that done for 1, hover over the bottom corner, left click, and while I'm holding down the left click, drag over to the right, and now I have median values for each of my 6 ratios for the year 2014. I'm going to repeat this 4 more times to get my data for each year individually. I know this is kind of tedious, but that's intentional so that you are doing the same tasks again and again, hopefully becoming very familiar with them. Okay, now I filtered my data for 2015. I see another divide by 0, can delete that. Copy the data, 2015, come up to the top, paste the data, Control V, put in my medians, and I'm putting the year in next to my medians because I'm eventually going to create a new worksheet with all of these median values once I do it for all 5 years. I'm going to continue this on my own without recording for 2016, 17, and 18, and the next video will give you the next steps.